New 787 Dreamliner factory is in a holding pattern. Today is the first National Labor Relations Board hearing on whether to open Boeing's South Carolina plant for business. The NLRB is looking into whether Boeing moved production to a non-union state in order to punish its Washington state unionized workers for past strikes. Senator Lamar Alexander wants to preserve right-to-work laws and co-wrote a bill called the Job Protection Act. He's also a chair of the Senate Republican Conference. You wrote this with Graham and DeMint. I know, Senator, what's the next step? What are the chances that you could actually, that this hearing would be irrelevant if you were actually able to get something into law? Is it really a possibility?
Well, it would be irrelevant if we got it into law. It's hard to do with President Obama in office and the Democrats in charge of the Senate. What we're trying to do is to say, look, in the United States, we're in the business of exporting airplanes, not exporting jobs. And this hearing in Seattle today is going to make it harder for not only Boeing, but Ford, General Motors, Nissan, Volkswagen, to make in the United States what they sell in the United States. So our legislation would preserve the right to work law in the United States, basically.
People point to this smoking gun from Jim Albaugh, that said we can't have these work stoppages every 3 years. That's why I guess he gave it to a paper that we can't have these work stoppages every 3 years, so we're going to open a plant in South Carolina. That's what they're going to point to as being a strike-busting move.
Well, that's for the judge to decide, but look, we've had the right-to-work law in the books since 1947. States have had the right to say, in our state, as in Tennessee, South Carolina, you don't have to join the union to get a job. And that's really created a competitive environment in which the entire American automobile industry has been able to stay in the United States. Look, Boeing sells planes everywhere in the world. It can make planes everywhere in the world. It's got 160,000 employees in the United States. We want them to stay here. We don't want them to move to Mexico or Europe or Southeast Asia because they can't operate in a competitive environment in the United States.
We had the former RNC chair, Governor Jim Gilmore, on last week, and I guess it kind of went over my head when he said it last week, but he said we don't want the balkanization of the United States as perpetrated by the NLRB to decide who can and who can't, have the expansion of a U.S. manufacturing facility. And the more I thought about it, that is amazing that you'd have a government agency trying to decide which states are able to actually have a factory built in them, an agency of the federal government with unappointed administrators. All right, they're unconfirmed.
With unemployment at 9%, I mean, keep in mind, Boeing announced this plant 2 years ago. They spent $1 billion. They hired 1,000 people. This is the first big airplane plant that's been built in the United States in 40 years. But just as you said, what the National Labor Relations Board Council is basically saying, okay, build 10 airplanes in Washington state and you can build 3 in South Carolina. That sounds like China, not the United States.
Wilbur?
Well, also, people don't seem to realize the right to work state doesn't prohibit the workers from joining the union. It's just they aren't required. So the union could just as well unionize folks in South Carolina if it came up with programs that appealed to them.
That's exactly right. In Tennessee, for the last 25 years, we've had a General Motors plant. It made Saturns for a long time, about 40 miles from a Nissan plant. And General Motors had the United Auto Workers. Nissan employees 3 times had the opportunity to choose the United Auto Workers. They decided to stay non-union. Saturn closed last year. The Nissan plant's been the most efficient automobile plant in North America. 30 years ago, Nissan made no cars and trucks in the United States. They're about to make 85% of all the cars and trucks they sell in the United States in the United States. That's what we want. We want those jobs here, and we need a competitive environment in which Ford, General Motors, Nissan, Volkswagen can do it.
All right, so how does the Obama administration, just tell me how it works. The Obama administration staffs the NLRB when they're brought into office. Is that how it works? But then they can't say, like the president couldn't say back off to the NLRB, could they? Could he?
Well, the president could make it clear this isn't the policy of his administration to begin with. The chairman of his export council is the chairman of the Boeing company. As I said earlier, I assume the president wants to export airplanes instead of jobs.
Then what's the problem? I don't understand that. Why would he not do it then, Senator? I don't understand.
It's an independent agency in this sense. You've got an acting general counsel not confirmed by the Senate. What he could do is withdraw the nominee of that person who the Senate hasn't confirmed and nominate a different person. That's the first thing he could do.
Why doesn't he? If he wants to get reelected and he wants to get the jobless rate back down under 9%?
Well, I guess because the unions don't want him to. Boeing expects to lose the case today. They expect to lose before the National Labor Relations Board. So that means for the next 2 years, we're going to have de facto law in this country that if you're a manufacturer in a state that does not have a right to work law, you better think twice before you move or expand in a state with a right to work law. So where do you go? Mexico.
You're right. I wouldn't want this getting out. If I'd tell my PR people that this Boeing thing, I really don't. Can you make sure that this doesn't get out what we're doing here? But that doesn't seem to be the case either.
We're doing everything we can to get the word out. That's why we have 35 senators who sponsored our Job Protection Act, which would say we need the right to work law in the United States so manufacturers of all kinds can make here what they sell here and not have an obstacle like this thrown up to them after they've already built a plant, hired 1,000 people, and are ready to start building 3 big airplanes a month and sell them around the world.
Let me see. Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. All right, Senator, we appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, see you later.
All right, when we come back, you feel like this market's been stuck in the mud. Maybe you're having a little bit of a tough time trying to keep up with the pace. We've got stocks to watch.